Welcome to episode 6 of Screenwriting Studies, the podcast. I will dive straight into it by introducing our guest for today, who is Rafael Leal. Rafael is a screenwriter, executive producer, and virtual reality creator from Brazil, but currently based in Germany, in Berlin. He taught screenwriting at the Pontifical Catholic University of Rio de Janeiro and completed his PhD in film at the Fluminense Federal University in Brazil, specializing in poetics of interactive and immersive narratives. And we'll talk a lot about this today. His creations include feature films and TV shows. I will only mention one title, Jungle Pilot with NBC Universal. Correct me if I am wrong. And among his academic publications, I'd like to mention his book, Transcultural Screenwriting, Telling Stories for a Global World for Cambridge Scholars, and of course, his chapter for the Palgrave Handbook of Screenwriting Studies, an ontology of the interactive script. We will draw much from this chapter in our conversation today, but first of all, Rafael, thank you very much for being with us today. Rafael, as I sort of mentioned in the introduction, you combine basically your practice with your academic research and studies. And so, can you tell us a little bit about your background, so we help also the viewers to understand where you come from and how this kind of work, or this blend between creative practice and research, has also informed your work for your book and your chapter and your, I guess, doctoral thesis as well.
Thank you very much, Paulo. Thank you, Klaus, Rosamund, for the invitation. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm really honored to have a chapter in this amazing book among such brilliant scholars of screenwriting. So it's really a pleasure and an honor. I like to say that I used to be an actor. I entered film school to study to be a director. And when I finished, I met no screenwriters. I needed a script to direct. There was none. So I said, oh, maybe I should write a script. And then in the beginning of the century, I started as a screenwriter. And it took many years for me after BA to join a master's degree and then to consider doing a PhD, because I felt I needed professional experience to know in practice what I would like to study. And this was a clear assumption for me since the beginning of my academic career. I always, the first things that I published, including the chapter in transcultural collaboration that you mentioned, my first publications were very based on my practice as a screenwriter. This chapter was based on the process of development of Jungle Pilots, as you mentioned, for NBC Universal, and the collaboration with a writer from the United States and the cultural differences that impacted in our work. The same way, I started working with virtual reality, with immersive narratives in 2016, and it became soon clear to me that that should be my theme in a possible PhD that I started in 2018 and thankfully finished 3 years ago. So yes, most of my theory and most of my academic reflections are based on my practice and in the issues and the challenges that I face in my daily life as a practitioner, as someone who writes and for different media, and to especially how that was my main question in my PhD, how the whole knowledge or the whole sets of rules and tools that we use in linear screenwriting or writing for flatties, for linear films and series for flat screen. Flatties people hate being called flatty, but that's okay. How could we use this set of theoretical and practical tools when writing for immersive and interactive narratives, which is totally different as we discussed today. And then I started researching interaction, immersion, and at some point I said, okay, but now I need to understand, to research script. And this chapter that we're discussing today is the second part of this dive into script, into an interactive script, asking the question, what is an interactive script that a linear script is not? What is the main difference? What is the essential difference that asks us for a different approach when writing, thinking, and discussing interactive narratives.
Yeah, that's interesting because, of course, you start and basically your main the research question that leads your chapter that drives the chapter is this distinction, which seems obvious between linear scripts and interactive scripts, but it's not really obvious because everybody seems to have a good grasp of what a linear script is, but even among scholars, there isn't a clear understanding of what an interactive script looks like. And also, we should use the plural, interactive scripts and different types of scripts. And also because possibly there isn't an agreed, also a consensus about what these should look like. I mean, not even in the industry, right? Am I right? So maybe, and of course, I think we will touch upon a number of elements that will maybe shed light on that. So could you maybe elaborate a little bit more in order to sort of start this process of clarification? Let's call it like that. Could you elaborate maybe on what is a possibly common theoretical framework that we could rely on if we were to define what is a suitable approach to define a script for interactive narratives? So can you give us a little bit of that context?
Yeah, this is a very interesting question because interactivity is one of the most widely used words around our business. Everything is interactive, as like immersive. Everything is immersive. And as Christoph Bode says, a concept that describes everything describes nothing. It's absolutely useless as a category to describe a specific number of works.
A video game would be generally interactive, and so a script for a video game would qualify for that definition. So give us a few other examples so that we sort of frame the discussion around
Yeah,
something recognizable.
a film where you choose something like Netflix Bandersnatch from Black Mirror. You have different options, A or B, and then you choose, you interfere in the narrative. Your agency, your capacity to choose and to act inside the narrative changes the shape of the narrative. So it's interactive. A video game, as you said, from Pac-Man to Last of Us, they're interactive because the input given by the player shapes the story or shapes the experience in a very determined way. Or, but you can say, for example, that a book such as Choose Your Own Story type of book that were in fashion when I was a kid, RPG books. If you want to face the Minotaur, go to page 69. If you want to turn around and flee, go to page 12. And then you go to that chapter and you keep, that's interactive. Um, but you can also argue that when reading a linear book, let's say the Bible, when you turn the pages, you're also interacting with it. That you cannot say that's not an interaction to turn a page and to change what you're viewing by the physical manipulation of the. But okay, if interactivity describes the Bible, Choose Your Own Inventory, and Last of Us, it's a terrible concept. It's a useless concept. So I decided to narrow down what is interactive and what is not. Clearly, to exclude the Bible from it, at least the current version. Maybe the next one will be interactive, really interactive. Uh, and we also run into a problem of, okay, but what's interactive? So how can I make a line and say this is and this is not? Because there's different levels of interactivity and different modes of interactivity. So I tried to come up with different authors that discuss different categories, and I found out three of them that compose the most of almost everything that I use in my work writing interactive narratives. And they are spatial exploration, which means the ability to go around the scene, even if it's in a 360 video, you just look around, or in a 2D game such as Firewatch, which most of the gameplay is basically walk around a park in Wyoming, where you take the job of a fire watcher after a tragic happening in your life. So that's spatial exploration. That's clearly interaction. You press forward in your joystick, in your control, or wherever, your character, your point of view moves forward. Clearly interaction, undeniable. Second one, manipulation of media objects. That would be pressing a button, grabbing an object, deciding between two. I'm right. This is interesting because I'm currently in the process of writing a script for a virtual reality documentary game, which is interactive from the beginning, from its beginning. And I'm in this process of bringing a pitch deck that we had to a document that the technical workers and the art directors and the actors could read and do their job on over that. So we're trying to find exactly this format of a script. And our interaction mechanism in this game is very simple. The host asks a question, and two spheres pop up in front of you, yes and no. The act of pressing, of touching these spheres is what I call manipulation of media objects. But also non-narrative games like Pac-Man, when you move you eat something or you flee from ghosts, you eat a ghost, that's manipulation of media objects also. But in virtual reality, when you have hands or virtual hands, that becomes even more obvious. And the third element would be nodal navigation, the navigation between the nodes, between the branches of the narrative, where in some moment you're asked to make a decision. For example, there's this brilliant virtual reality documentary called Kuzunda, directed by Gayatri Parwamazaran, I think it's how to pronounce her name, a Berlin-based VR director, and it's about the disappearing Kuzunda language of the Kuzunda people who lives in the mountains of Nepal. And at some point, the elder Kuzunda is telling you the story of how he met a wild animal, either a bear or a tiger. And you have to speak tiger or bear in Kuzunda in order to choose. And he will only tell you one story. So when you choose, you decide I'm going to this path or to this path. That's nodal navigation. And it's also a clear type of interactivity where you have different possible paths or different possible endings and you navigate through them, creating your own story, pretty much like the books from the 80s.
Yeah, sorry. I was looking behind myself because somewhere there on the shelves I have Rayuela by Julio Cortázar, which is a very unusual type of book because of course if I remember correctly, the reader can read in a linear sequence the chapters, but not all of the chapters from 1 to 56, but the book actually has 150 plus chapters. And so the alternative would be and to follow it's really a list of instructions, but it's really a map that Cortázar gives the reader. And so the reader can decide to use the map to basically hopscotch through the chapters from one to the other in a number of different combinations. And actually, I think that the English edition of Rayuela is actually titled Hopscotching. And so, of course, this is some sort of a very specific way of interaction because of course it's in a book, it's not on a screen media narrative, but I'm mentioning this because of course this brings into the equation, I think, another element that you address in your chapter, which is basically the whole authorship issue, right? Because now we bring the user of the narrative into this equation. So you tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, this is really interesting. When I started studying, I was sure that was my job as an artist, as a creator, to design a whole closed experience that I would deliver to my spectator or my reader or my player, and they would be um, receiving that experience and taking it into fruition and admiring how brilliant it was. And then, of course, I started growing up and getting more mature and reading and studying. And I came across in my master's Roland Barthes with The Death of the Author. In the beginning, I hated Barthes for what he was writing, and I felt offended. But luckily, we grow and our heart uh, softens. And I today believe that he's absolutely right when he says that the death of the author is the birth of the reader. I cannot control what people will understand from the experience I so carefully designed. That belongs to people. The same way, I don't react mostly the way that some creators expect me to react after their works of art, after their books, after their films. It's my um it's my right to react and to feel and to receive that according to my codes, to my experiences, to my trauma, to my references, and to build meaning myself, not import or download meaning from the book or from the film. And when you write an interactive script, that becomes even more radical because it's not only the way you apprehend the proposed experience, it's the form itself of the work that it's being discussed, that is open to be changed. I'm inviting your participation as a player or as an interactor, as I prefer to call it, to create the final form of the work, the final shape, the order of the scenes, like Cortázar brilliant did in Rayuela. And then you create a universe, you propose a set of rules, and the end, it's impossible to know where it's gonna end because it will depend on the spectators. And this is brilliant because it's a relief. It's like releasing me from the need of projecting, of proposing a brilliant experience. I'm not Shakespeare. I'm not a Greek tragedy author that will make the whole polis cry in catharsis with the brilliant Oedipus. That's not me. I don't want that kind of responsibility to take the whole audience. Yeah, luckily that's gone. I want to propose a discussion. I want to tell a story. I want to invite my spectators or my interactors to help me tell the story, to produce meanings that will be meaningful in their lives, in their references. And sometimes it won't be understood, of course, and that's part of the game. Some part people will produce meanings that were not what you were expecting, but yeah, we only learn by this in this exchange between readers and writers.
Yeah, let's stay on this notion of relief. And let's see if I can make it provoke you into telling us a little bit more because uh, as you were saying, of course, what this implies is that you, as the developer or designer or author or writer, you still need to sort of figure out all of the possible interactions scenarios, right? And so it's actually a lot of work. And where do you decide, okay, we have enough combinations, we have enough options, and at the same time, you still have to preserve the, let's say, the concept of your screen work as a whole, so that it is recognizable. So where do you strike the balance there?
Yeah, this is very difficult. First, I cannot guarantee that I will explore all the possibilities.
Well, not
In my,
all the possibilities, but let's say enough, a sufficient
yeah,
number of possibilities.
in my in the game I'm currently developing, you play against four other non-player characters drawn from a database of eight non-player characters that we researched and interviewed, and we were playing against them. And we also have a huge database of 50, 60 questions so that you can play four, five, six times without repeating questions or the group of players. Maybe repeat one of another, but you play with different groups and different questions. I cannot imagine all the possible results. I can imagine category of results. You go better than average. You go the average, you go lower than the average. You lead, you are the worst ranking participant. But especially, how will people understand that? How will people receive that? How will people react to that? How will my interactors react to that? I cannot presuppose or imagine or define That's open, and that's a risk. If I do a very conservative work, okay, I want to avoid risk, then I'm probably avoiding a lot of other things. Innovation, for example. If I keep on sure grounds, okay, this has not a lot of space for interpretation, which is difficult because it always has. But I prefer to take a bit of risk and to try to expand my limits and to see what will happen, to see how people will receive it, and the syntax of my work won't say everything that I need to know, not the semantics. We need the pragmatics to we need that to rub. Barthes also said, language is like the skin. I rub my language against the other's language. I think it's really beautiful. We have to rub. Without this exposure, we cannot previously understand. And this is something that I consider extremely relevant when we, when we come to interactive script. Maybe I'm spoiling a future point of the discussion, but it's the fact that the scripts preserve future as a space of possibility, as Bode wrote, Bode and Dietrich, because we do not define everything previously. I cannot define all the possible outcomes of my game because there are hundreds of thousands. And it's needless also to do that. I prefer to preserve the outcome of the game as a space of possibilities, as limited as I can, but not too much limited. Otherwise, it's too secure. And now with this certainty also comes a lot of restraints.
I want to share some personal experience because I too worked on the development of a video game, and which was a narrative video game. So, and this is just to understand better what shape, what does it look like, what do the scripts that we use in game development, for instance, what do they look like, what tools do we use? And we would start because we would have basically the narrative sort of plan, and we would start with one of the situations, then of course branch out in all these kind of options. So we would start by drawing a flow chart, and so we would use YED as a software to do that first. Then for each of the options, we would write the text. So basically, what we would call the scenes for with the dialogue and the action. And then for each of those, then we would actually break down all of that, and we would use a spreadsheet in Excel because then that has to be built into the video game engine, etc. So is it something similar that you work on, or do you use other tools, or what are the various stages that you go through? So this is just because it's about defining the ontology, but also what it looks like on a screen, on a page, which
Yeah,
tools you use. So
this is a very good question. In my first scripts, even if they were interactive, I tried to write them in Final Draft with this choose your own story type. If you choose yes, you go to scene 7. If you choose no, you go to scene 8. And then you direct your reading. But that's a terrible solution. But now, in this virtual reality game that I'm developing right now, we had this problem. The co-creators, myself and Thiago Rosa, we we developed the creation, we developed our concept and produced a 60-page pitch deck with all the scenarios, imaginary runs, list of assets, justifications, marketing plan, everything around the project that we need to pitch to get funding. We got funding from Medium Board Berlin Brandenburg, the organ of Berlin that funds film and media and games. We got this Innovative Narratives Fund. And then we could apply for production or for prototype. We decided to apply for production because we have one scenario and one interaction mechanism. So our prototype is 80% of our minimum viable product, MVP, is almost the game. So we decided to apply, which is more difficult, for combined prototyping and production grant. And we got it. So when we started working with designers, art directors, programmers, 3D artists, we didn't have a prototype. So we didn't also had a script on Final Draft or anything that we could consider a script. We have a long document that described everything, which would be the GDD and the game design document in the video game industry, but was not also organized in the form of a game design document. So, in order to approach potential co-producers, which we're doing now, we had something to show. We had to have something. And then we chose a click-through version of the game, an HTML text-based with a few images version of the game. Instead of having an image, I have a text that describes you are here, what do you do? This or this. And you click and you have a hyperlink to the other page. And this is what we're considering a script now. Of course, then this generates a breakdown, a list of assets that should be produced. They will be produced and they will be placed in the order described in this document. And this document is interesting because you can play it as an HTML or you can watch it as a fluxogram. You can watch the architecture of the narrative in a board, in a 2D board. And that's brilliant because you can access easily the parts and the steps, and you can also see from inside or from outside. So it's this dual aspect of the script. We use a platform called Twine, a language for interactive scripts that's very easy to master. You can place anything, embed films, embed image, place countdowns, whatever. It's very versatile in terms of tools for the writers. And we are soon replacing the elements, putting their references, the type of sound effects that I want, the type of the visual references. I'm absolutely obsessed now with a German TV presenter from the 70s and 80s, Hans Rosenthal. It's unbelievable because we have the same guy in Brazil. Yeah, it's called Silvio Santos. It's the same guy who presented the same type of shows, the same quick wit, the same. Silvio Santos a bit more energetic, of course, Brazilian, but very fun. And so we grab these references from YouTube, from images, from other websites, and we place directly into the script as references, directly into the HTML. So whoever accesses to to get a grip on what is going on, what they have to do on their work, 3D artists or our VR architect or our head Unity programmer, they have a total notion of what are intending to do. And version after version, we put a bit more content on that. We put a bit more lines because also we are not creating the lines as I would create for a film or a series imagining on my in front of my computer. We're creating those lines in a rehearsal room, in a spatial mode, because these lines won't be said by an actor in a flat screen. They will be said by an avatar of the host that will be in the same virtual space as the interactor's avatar. So there is this embodiment because it's virtual reality that I cannot ignore, and so I have to bring it to my creative process.
Do we have any questions for Rafael? So we move on to the second part of the episodes. So questions for Rafael.
Yeah, so thanks so much, Rafael, for that really interesting discussion around your chapter, but also how that's kind of evolving in your current work. And I was interested because about what you were saying about the place of the reader or the participant or the player or the whatever we're calling them in the interactive space. And because I think it's interesting that in a way that even though these kinds of interactive modes of storytelling actually kind of deliberately design the reader's experience into it and they make that place, it's like in a way what's funny is that sometimes well, in my own experience, that seems to be that sometimes then you actually need to sort of, even though you're in a way giving them more freedom, you actually also have to give them more instructions. So, because I'm working on an audio, like a locative narrative that's a GPS enabled audio piece that we just did a first test with. And yeah, we found that we just needed to build so many more instructions, into the story in order for the narrative receiver to participate in the narrative. They actually sort of need to be instructed quite closely. So and yeah, which I've sort of, I think it's really interesting in terms of, in a way, you're opening up to the reader, but then you're actually having to script what they do to a certain extent so that they can have that freedom. So I'd be interested, like, to know, like, your experience of that particular aspect of how you effectively design that narrative receiver's role in creating the narrative.
Oh, this is really interesting. Thanks for the question. When you write a film, you don't care about a spectator. You suppose that is a random person sitting in a film theater. You don't care where they are sitting or if they are eating popcorn or not, or it's absolutely irrelevant for the work of a film screenwriter. But when I'm writing, you just tell your story. You write on your script whatever goes on the screen, and you tell a story, and that's it. That's your job. But when you're writing an interactive narrative and I have to give instructions, I have not only give the instructions, but train the person to execute the instructions in order not to have to learn in the middle of the game. So in the beginning, I have to train, press yes or no, turn this. You have to learn this vocabulary of the game. Press, kill, jump, hide, talk. It does not come naturally. And this adds another category of information. So I have to instruct, not about the story, but also about the gameplay. And the more I tell you about the gameplay, the less into the story you are. And the more into the story you are, the less playing you are. So, yeah, they call it the ludonarrative paradox. And I face it every day. How much do I take you in the narrative, in the environment, and let you go with the flow and the emotions and the immersion? Or I want you to execute the steps. I don't want you to play my game for 45 minutes because it's exhaustive. I want you to play for 25 minutes. But if you take too long to make your decisions because you're searching where to click, I hate that when I'm playing and I cannot find where to click or where to go. That's the reason number one for me to give up on virtual reality experiences or video games when I'm stuck.
Exactly.
So
So
yeah, I
actually,
think
yeah. No,
yeah,
I was just
please.
going to say, so actually leaving people to be immersed in the narrative without the instruction actually often has the opposite effect because they become unimmersed because they
Yes.
they don't know how to interact with it. Yeah.
So I have been preferring simpler interaction mechanisms that people will learn quickly in the beginning of the game. So for example, in my game, I introduce all the mechanisms when you're creating your avatar. You create your own avatar very quickly with a very limited number of options. I don't want you to sculpt an avatar that resembles your physical appearance because that would take maybe 1 hour and we don't have that time. I'm designing this for film festivals where people want to watch it in 15, 20 minutes. Those have the biggest lines, the 15, 20 minutes experiences. That multiplayer, 1 hour, 20 minutes, they're much more complex to watch. So I want people to watch my experience, my virtual reality game. And we're training the spectators in the two only mechanisms, spinning wheel and yes and no spheres, creating their avatar with 5, 6 questions: body type, color of accessories, hairstyle, and that's it. Do you confirm? Yes, no. Do you confirm? Yes, no. Because this is how we're going to play the game. You're repeating that gesture 12 times throughout the game, 16 times. So, and also spinning the wheel that will repeat twice more. So I introduce you in the beginning, and then I try to introduce you seamlessly. You think you are already playing, but you're learning. And then when it's time to play, you don't have to learn. You already learned everything. So I don't have to stop the game to give you instructions. I only give contingent instructions. For example, you're taking too much time to make a decision. So the host says, it's time to make a decision. And then you're stimulated to click, to move forward. But yeah, it's sad when you have to stop the narrative to teach a different thing and to give some space for the person to train. I have a new weapon. Okay, how do I use it? You have to give me some easy monsters to train my new weapon. Otherwise, I will die. I never use that weapon. I will die in the game.
In a way, a narrative script for a feature film is doing comparable things in the first act or first 20, showing what kind of genre it is, what they have to expect. Should it be funny or whatever? It gives you some information, and that you can then enjoy the rest of the film. But screenwriters are doing this. They are telling you how to uh, receive and how to react on what
Yes.
will follow in a way. But I'm more interested in how do you limit yourself because you cannot have too many. The options are multiplying. And there has to be an end somewhere. You cannot script any possible outcome or solution. So you're saying you're doing it with yes and no. And where is the end of the narrative? How is there an end? Is there a
Yes.
closure?
It has to have an end. Yeah, and I don't want this end to be 1 hour in the future. I want to be 25 minutes.
Okay.
No, in this game specifically, it's called the Privilege Game Show. And it's a game show like Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, but instead of trivia, the questions regard privilege: sex, race, gender, and class privilege. So you answer your questions yes and no, but this does not branch the narrative. It just compare points. And then we have other segments of the narrative that will come after, no matter the result. So, for example, you have the opportunity to rewatch an accelerated animation of the game through the eyes of other character. You see your avatar in third person. So this is a twist. What I mean about how to watch a film, and of course we do that, setting up a common code in the first act. But in general, what do you need to know how to watch a film? You sit down, you open your eyes, and you look to the screen. That's the way to watch a film the last 100 years, mostly. And that's given. Everyone enters in a film theater. They don't need instructions to do that. They just sit down and look at the screen naturally. That's given. But when I ask you to put a headset, or even in Bandersnatch without headset, when Netflix says, okay, now you choose, that's different. Something pop up in my screen and waits for my acting. So I have to get the remote control on my phone and make a choice. And this is not given. This should be trained. Because at the same way, the writers of a video game, they have to establish a code. But in addition to the code, the genre, the tone, and the characters, and everything that the linear screenwriters also have to set up in their first acts, there's more. There is a way to use, a way to manipulate, a way to interact the game that should be explained. Not, either in or seamlessly, like we're trying to do, or in a training session. First, you train twice, uh, Beat Saber. First, you train. Now you get how you do it. Okay, let's play. Many games do that because so this instruction. I hope that soon virtual reality will become also will develop a consolidated fruition culture, what I like to call it. Film has a very solid fruition culture. We know how to watch a film, but we don't know how to experiment a virtual reality. Flat video games, in most cases, they are also known. They are around for 40, 50 years. You get a control, and you never played PlayStation in your life. You get a PlayStation, you know exactly. There are arrows to go forward, back. Yeah, maybe for my generation, that's okay. That's some people know, some people don't know. Younger people than me, they have it automatically. A kid, a 15 years old kid, gets my headset for the first time, and they're playing if they have known it since ever. That's impressive. So I think in the future that will become easier, and we don't have to train the spectator so much in the modes of interaction. But for now, we need, especially when we're writing virtual reality experiences or interactive experiences for film festivals, where we have a very different audience, a very wide array of people in the audience, some with a lot of experience, some young, some old, some from film, some. So we need to please them all, especially if you're in the jury. And for that, we have to take care in the script and to design carefully welcoming proposals for a different type of people that will be in our audience.
But you're doing something different than the usual interactive. You're using the form and then are telling something political about real
Yes.
people and the world we live in, about race, class, and gender. So how does this work in your experience with 15-year-olds or with a young audience that is known to play and does not read books about race, class, and gender?
That's exactly our goal. Because if you are young and you don't need to train yes and no or click and twist and spin, you're just creating your avatar and going to the play. If you are not used to this technology, you are learning in the beginning. And also, we keep it to a very basic level of interactivity because I want to leverage the language of virtual reality to make people perceive their own privilege in an embodied way and not that they learn to play a complex game. So the game is extremely simple. That's why I decided to move directly to production and not to prototype. I don't need a prototype for a very simple thing. I will need at some point, but not now to explain to people. So, not 100% sure of this, but we are sticking to the decision we made. Um, and yeah, I think we balance both. In order to make my message reach, it's like Kuzunda, the documentary I mentioned. In order to tell a story about a disappearing language, she makes you speak the language. She puts words in that language in your mouth. And that's brilliant because it's extremely simple and extremely effective. And that's what I'm targeting when I want to reach a wide audience, to be simple and powerful in the message. Sometimes you can be very simple in your message in some games. Last of Us, for example, it's kind of simple. You have very clear goals, but the gameplay, everything is so brilliant that you get dragged into that world.
Yeah, Rafael. talking about limits, and of course, because you're talking about projects that involve virtual reality, and so you try and keep it short, and you said 20, 25 minutes. But if we're talking about instead video games that don't use virtual reality, and I'm thinking about, for instance, Persona, which has a completion time of I think it's 100 hours, which means that gamers will have to probably engage for 200 hours in order to complete. Would you be willing to work on a project such as that, which is of course a different
Definitely. I
approach?
would love to. I'd
Mhm.
love to work in these large scales narrative formats for video games.
Yeah.
Uh, I have no idea how, but yeah, I think it's brilliant. It's like writing a series. For example, Sopranos is 80 hours. To commit 80 hours of the life of a human being to a story is a very powerful commitment. And can you imagine 200 hours with a level of attention that no Sopranos spectators ever had because you almost don't blink when you're in the video game. You have a very continuous attention, as says Jonathan Crary, instead of this fragmented attention regime that we use, for example, in life or in film. Or
I was just wondering then, to go back to this question of the ontology of the interactive script, and thinking about the interactive script compared to the screenplay. I mean, would you say that, is it arguable that actually it's like we can maybe talk about the ontology of a standard screenplay, but actually the ontology of a interactive screenplay is something that is not, that is fluid, that is hard to actually define, because it's something that just there's no one model. It's not there's no one thing. It's like many things, maybe. Would you say?
yeah, I would say that a script for a film took at least 30, 40 years
Yeah.
to get the shape we have been using the last century. So we're not even close to having an hegemonic format of it. But what I propose as an ontology of the interactive script is, even though we have very different formats being used throughout the industry and the industries, because we have different industries dealing with
Yeah.
this, not only video games, but XR experiences, interactive films, um, large scale installations that also are scripted, immersive theater. There are some common elements or some essential elements in these different scripts that could amount for this category of interactive script. And one of them, as Bode wrote, is preserving the future as a space of possibility, but also considering the player, considering the interactor. We don't write the spectator in the script, in a film script. We don't write the word spectator, almost never. But it's impossible to write an interactive script without having this figure of the spectator, the interactor, in the center, in the core of the script. Everything is written around this person for their experience. So, although we cannot reach a form so far, and maybe we will not, maybe in a few years we'll just think about the script and it will materialize somewhere. I don't know where we're going. Maybe it's too futuristic. But in terms of virtual reality, for example, I'm sorry because I'm obsessed with this theme. I envision a type of script that does not go through the paper, through the 2D paper, because I don't have to go through a linear medium to think spatial, something that I think spatially and will be produced spatially. I don't need to transcribe it through a linear medium. It makes no sense. So I envision a type of script that is native from the immersive environment. And same goes for the interactive script. There are elements that are common to all those modalities that really are common and make themselves a category um, with a clear separation from the category of linear scripts, whatever form they take to the present. I cannot speak to the future. That's the type of sentence that ages really bad.
Okay, so the podcast series is going to take a break over the summer months, but we hope to be back with a new batch of episodes in the autumn, and of course we will share all the information and details in the coming months. For now, Rafael, thank you so much for joining us, for your usual enthusiasm and all the insights and insiders knowledge that you have shared with us today. It's
Thank
been
you very
great
much. It's
having
my
you.
pleasure. You are three references of mine. I'm honored to be here. Thank you.